Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Animal Legal Defense Fund's Animal Law Academy. My name is Alyssa Sander, and I'm the Animal Law Program Fellow. I'm so happy that you're able to join us today as we take a look at some legislative updates. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes. We will have a brief Q&A at the end of the presentation, and we will try and get through as many questions as we can. If we don't get to your question, we will get back to you via email. To submit your questions at any time, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. If you're joining us via phone, please submit questions to webinars@aldf.org. Additional resources for this webinar will be available on our website at aldf.org/webinars. Click on today's webinar and it should take you right to it. We'll also drop links in the chat box throughout the presentation so you can follow along there as you go. This webinar does offer closed captioning. Closed captioning is automatically turned off for attendees. To enable, please click the caret icon near the CC button at the bottom of your screen and select Show Subtitles. To change the font size, click on Subtitle Settings. We recommend keeping your mouse cursor off the Zoom monitor to prevent the captioning from moving on the screen. Joining me today is Jennifer Haig, Legislative Affairs Manager. Thank you so much for sharing your time and wisdom with us today, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Alyssa, and welcome everyone to the second quarterly legislative update for 2022. As Alyssa said, I'm Jennifer Haig, a Legislative Affairs Manager in the Legislative Affairs Program at the Animal Legal Defense Fund. We are halfway through the calendar year, and a lot of states are out of session now, so I have lots of great victories to report. Some states are still in session with ongoing legislation, and there are lots of updates there as well. I recognize and figure some of you folks are regulars, which we really appreciate, to these webinars. So I front-loaded all the news to the beginning of the presentation, and at the end, we'll cover how to apply what you've learned in your own advocacy. Again, leaving time for questions at the end. So while there will be a lot of content coming at you, feel free to note down anything that I might not have discussed in as much detail, and feel free to ask me or I'll pass you on to one of my colleagues in the program. Before I begin, I want to set the stage. Each legislative session, the Animal Legal Defense Fund works on well over 100 bills. Our staff may play a leadership or a supporting role in coalitions backing legislation, and I'll highlight the bills that we've been involved with by issue category, but it's not an exhaustive list of even our own work, much less all the animal legislative efforts across the country. You may see something from your state, but you may not. If your state isn't mentioned, you may find good transferable ideas and efforts underway in other states, which is why I've organized by topic. I've also included bill numbers for each bill I'll talk about, so you can look up the bill text and specifics on each state legislature's website if you want, as I can only give you the highlights in the time we have together today. So without further ado, here's what's happened since the Q1 update in mid-March. Let's start with legislative victories. There are so many to report, there will be 2 slides. First, let's start with what was signed into law and passed the legislature. Maryland became the second state to ban cat declawing. You'll hear in a bit that there are many more states that have declaw bills in process as well, so maybe there will be a third victory or more to report later in the year. Arizona created a law to ban breed discrimination in insurance underwriting, and this will become effective June 30th of next year. In greyhound racing, 2 states have passed laws on this topic. In Colorado, while greyhound racing was previously banned in the state, the new law elevates the status of greyhounds to companion animals and repeals an exemption for greyhound breeders from the Pet Animal Care Facilities Act. In Oregon, there also aren't currently any greyhound tracks, but the new law will also prohibit Oregon licensed gambling operations from accepting internet bets on greyhound races from individuals living in states where greyhound racing is illegal. In other words, this law limits greyhound betting via advanced deposit wagering, also known as internet gambling, to only the 9 states where dog racing is still legal. Florida created a $300,000 program for funding of veterinary care for police dogs in retirement, and Connecticut passed a law which updates an existing law on tethering restrictions and adequate shelter requirements. The Florida government, in late-breaking news, just signed an animal sexual abuse bill, which strengthens penalties for sexual abuse of animals and imposes a possession ban in those instances. Arizona adopted hen welfare regulations through the Department of Agriculture, and as of October 1 through the end of next year, laying hens must have a minimum of 1 square foot of floor space. Then, as of 2025, the full cage-free mandate begins. In New York, there were a couple bills that have passed the legislature but are waiting to be signed by the governor. These are big victories, even at this stage, because they've been worked on for a long time. The first is the Puppy Mill Pipeline Act, which prohibits the sale of puppies, kittens, and rabbits in retail stores. You might know this as what we more commonly call the retail pet sales ban. This has been a long-fought battle in New York over many years to have the bill pass out of both houses. We're now urging the Governor Hochul, to call the bill and sign it into law, which could happen anytime, but we expect it to be in the fall or anytime up to the end of the year. If she does sign it, it will go into effect 1 year later. And then all eyes will be on New Jersey because of the close proximity of that state where stores would potentially want to move over. We're in conversation with legislators and coalition partners to see what we could do to prepare for this change and gain traction on puppy mills in New Jersey. Cruelty-Free Cosmetics Act prohibits the manufacture or sale of most cosmetics tested on animals. This passed the legislature and now awaits action by the governor. 9 states have already passed, with Louisiana being the most recent in the last week. Sometimes legislative victories actually are things we've defeated. So the first category is bills that made it through the legislature, but we helped to get vetoed by the governor. In Wisconsin, there were 2 bills. The first, SB 563, would have allowed farm-raised bovids and expanded support for canned hunting in that state. And the second, on roadside zoos, would have removed state oversight of roadside zoos, which was a big win. And this is a state that we hadn't previously worked in a lot, but we became aware of the issue. We're drawn into a coalition, activated patch-through calls with the support of advocates such as yourself that helped to pressure the governor's office, and were able to secure the veto. So it really shows the power of all of us working together to make things happen in this way. In Florida, there was an important veto that also just came about. This would have allowed businesses to sue local governments if 15% or more of their revenue per year was lost due to the passage of an ordinance. This really kind of came out of COVID, but it was supported by Petland and would have made it virtually impossible to continue passing local retail pet sales bans as well. Advocates can make a difference, as shown by this example as well. We far outweighed support by hundreds of calls and thousands of emails versus single digits from the other side on this issue. Without this public pressure, the veto of this bad bill might not have happened. So thank you very much. In another category, we defeated legislation, meaning it didn't move through the legislature, so we were able to kill it earlier on. In Utah, we defeated a preemption bill as well that would have allowed preemption of local animal protection bills such as retail sales bans and circus bans. It died when the bill became toxic from massive opposition, and the sponsor declined to move forward with it. However, we anticipate it could come back next session in some way, so we are working with a coalition to oppose that again. And in Minnesota, there was a bill that failed to move that would have exempted exhibitors accredited by the Zoological Association of America. We normally abbreviate to ZAA, exempted them from Minnesota's current law restricting the possession of dangerous wild animals. Our patch-through calls and memos of opposition to state legislators had a major impact and resulted in the removal of the pro-ZAA language from the bill, which then died in committee. In Missouri, another preemption bill, the legislative session adjourned early, and the Senate failed to take any action on this bill, about which we joined a coalition to oppose. Thankfully, this means that the local cat declaw bans in the state are not affected. So moving on to what's happening currently, I've got a chart here showing all of the legislatures that are still in session. All but Rhode Island are in the second year of a 2-year session, which means as of 2023, they will be starting fresh with a new 2-year to start with new bills, or anything that doesn't pass this year would start over and get reintroduced. The highlighted states are where we are leading on bills. I'll also note that Massachusetts' formal session ends at the end of July, but informally continues through the end of the year, and there's still a chance to move animal bills during that time frame. Typically, it's a big push through the end of July, and we'll have to see what remains after that that could move through the end of the year. New Jersey is about to recess at the end of the week for the July-August period and come back in the fall. And California as well is taking a July recess before the final 1-month push in August. So here are the specific bills organized by topic category that are in sessions, or legislatures that are in session currently. In the companion animal space, the first thing I'll talk about is the Courtroom Animal Advocate Program, or CAP. This is novel legislation from ALDF that would allow supervised law students and pro bono attorneys to represent the interests of animals in criminal cases or civil proceedings concerning an animal's well-being. New Jersey, the bill passed the Assembly Policy Committee and is awaiting a floor vote, which will be sometime after the recess in the fall. In Rhode Island, unfortunately, the Senate bill was held for further study, and it won't be moving forward this session. If you recall from the previous slide, Rhode Island session ends on Thursday, so not a lot of time for things to happen there. In the possession ban category, Massachusetts has a bill that prevents people convicted of certain animal cruelty crimes, including torture, mutilation, and dogfighting, from possessing, adopting, or fostering an animal for at least 5 years after they're released from custody for a first offense and 15 years for a second or subsequent offense. This bill has become part of the Senate Judiciary minibus, which is basically a conglomeration of multiple bills all in the same general topic. It's joined with things like cross-reporting and a spay and neuter bill. It has a high likelihood of moving this session. And in New Jersey, the possession ban is called Moose's Law, and it has passed the Senate and will start movement in the Assembly in the fall. On cross-reporting, I want to speak about the Massachusetts bill. This would mandate veterinary and interagency reporting of suspected animal abuse. This is also part of that Senate Judiciary minibus package, which is on hold until the budget is approved. But again, it's looking good with all those other bills that are clumped together. On puppy mill related bills, the main topic that we are pursuing here is financing bans. What this does is prohibits lenders from offering financing for the purchase of dogs or cats due to predatory lending. This gets at puppy mills from a consumer protection angle and it's a popular bipartisan concept, and Illinois passed the first law last year. In Pennsylvania, a bill has been introduced and is awaiting its first hearing. And in California, a similar bill just passed the Assembly, and most recently yesterday passed its Senate Policy Committee hearing, which now goes to Senate Appropriations and a floor vote in August. New Jersey will also have a financing ban bill. It's in development and will be introduced later this session. New Jersey's started their legislative session for 2 years in 2022, so they're more at the beginning of their 2-year cycle. In cat declaw, New Jersey has a bill that's been introduced, but no movement yet. But again, it's early in the 2-year session. Delaware has seen quite a bit of movement on this issue and passed 2 anti-declaw bills out of the full House by strong margins. House Bill 333 prohibits the declawing of cats outright, and House Bill 386 prohibits a landlord from requiring a tenant to declaw a cat as a condition of entering into or renewing a rental agreement. Both have Senate Policy Committee hearings tomorrow, and if they pass, they'll be heard on the Senate floor on Thursday or Friday before the end of session. The Pennsylvania bill was just introduced this month, and it's awaiting its first hearing. The Rhode Island bill, unfortunately, was like the other Rhode Island bill I'd mentioned that was held for further study and won't be moving this session. The California bill has passed the Assembly and is awaiting its Senate Policy Committee hearing. It must get out by the end of the month, so we're anxiously awaiting news on that front. And the Massachusetts declaw bill had its first Policy Committee hearing, but is still in process before the Senate floor vote. Now moving on to wildlife. Wildlife killing contest ban is like it sounds. I'll mention specifically about the New Jersey bills. While sometimes wildlife killing contests address a specific species like coyotes, depending on the state and what type of wildlife and contests they may have there, the New Jersey ban has broad animal inclusion specific to the wildlife of that state. That includes bobcat, coyote, crow, fox, mink, possum, rabbit, raccoon, skunk, squirrel, weasel, and woodchuck. The broader, the better. The Senate companion bill was introduced this quarter, and we are working to secure more co-sponsors. On circus and traveling shows, the Massachusetts bill would prohibit the use of certain wild animals, that is, elephants, big cats, primates, giraffes, and bears, in circuses and traveling shows. This is a high priority bill and has a high likelihood of moving. In black bear management, there are 2 states addressing this issue. In California, we supported a black bear hunting moratorium petition to the Department of Fish and Wildlife based on recent population declines. The petition was denied, unfortunately, but the good news is it resulted in identification of a need for greater transparency for agency communications, and the agency made a commitment to update the black bear management plan within the next year. We are part of an ongoing coalition to monitor and weigh in on that plan's development. In New Jersey, the bill would ban intentional and unintentional feeding of black bear, and we continue to speak with legislators about this issue and request co-sponsors. No committee hearing date has been set yet. For poaching in Massachusetts, this issue would protect the welfare and conservation of native species important to Massachusetts ecosystems by modernizing penalties for illegal hunting, some of which are out of date by about 100 years, and would authorize Massachusetts to enter into the Interstate Wildlife Violator Compact, which already benefits every other state wildlife agency in the continental United States. Massachusetts is the only remaining non-member state in the compact since Hawaii entered last year. It has advanced through committee, a high priority bill, high likelihood of moving this session, and that will be great news to make Massachusetts number 50 and close out that issue. Massachusetts is also pursuing a rodenticides ban, similar to what passed in California 2 sessions ago. This decreases the use of rat poisons by mandating the use of integrated pest management plans on public lands and publicly owned property. The reason to do this is because other wildlife that eats the rats that have been poisoned then becomes secondarily poisoned. This has one of the best chances of passing in the House of the animal bills, but the House bills are not quite as well positioned as what all is moving in the Senate. In farmed animals, the biggest issue is the confinement bill specific to gestation and veal crates in New Jersey. This prohibits intensive confinement of mother pigs and veal calves. We have been working on this issue for the better part of 10 years and may have a path forward this year. Will be taken up again in the fall after summer recess, so stay tuned for more news on that one. Regarding fur and foie gras, Rhode Island, let's see. Okay, both bills in Rhode Island passed the House and are awaiting Senate committee hearings. Again, the Rhode Island legislature ends this week, so the likelihood of movement is slim, but you never know. So we are watching carefully to see what might happen there. In DC, a fur sales ban has been introduced, but not moved yet. Now, DC is a little different than a regular state. and they have year-round session. So there's not such a high pressure to get things done by a certain date, so things can take a little bit longer that way. In Oregon, there is a mega dairy moratorium effort that is in preparation for the 2023 session. This would prohibit new or expanded dairy CAFOs, which is confined animal feeding operations, identified as 2,500 or more cows, until the legislature can address the water, air, and animal welfare issues inherent to these factory farm operations. We are actively preparing for next session's bill to introduce for the third time. And lastly, the Citations Authority for Keeping Animals in Cruel Conditions allows law enforcement officers to issue citations for all domestic animals, including farmed animals in cruel conditions, expanding upon the current law that only applies to dogs. Currently, the only tool that law enforcement officers have is a felony cruelty charge. Providing a citation with a monetary fine gives officers the ability to achieve corrective action without automatically invoking a felony prosecution. This has passed out of the Senate Policy Committee and is now part of the Senate Judiciary Minibus Bill, which, if you recall from the previous slides, is positioned to move well. These are some bills that didn't fit into the other categories, but are equally important. The DC Omnibus Cruelty Package has been introduced, but there's no new news as of this quarter. I still wanted to mention it here because you can see the breadth of issues that are covered here that are all very important, and we are working carefully on this issue to see if we can still get it moving along. In New Jersey, the Cost of Animal Care and Pre-Conviction Forfeiture Bill revises the law prohibiting cruel tethering and confinement of dogs and establishes procedures for seizure, care, and forfeiture of animals involved in animal cruelty violations. This unanimously passed the Senate at the start of the quarter and is awaiting an assembly hearing, probably not until September or beyond. Regarding animal research and cosmetics ban, Massachusetts has an animal testing bill, colloquially known as the Beagle Bill, to retire research animals at the end of their use in testing. Like the Massachusetts rodenticides bill, one of the more likely bills to move in the House, but not as likely as those in the Senate. Finally, Rhode Island cosmetics ban. This unfortunately has been held for further study and doubtful will move as session ends this week. So that's what's been on our radar for the last 3 months for at a state level. Now I want to talk about what's happening federally. This is the 117th Congress that we're in. We are in the second year of the 2-year session. Note that there will also be a congressional recess for the summer in August to mid-September. So there's a push to get things done before legislators leave, and then work will come up again in the fall. This list is not comprehensive in the same way I mentioned that for the state bills. There are other bills we're also tracking and involved with, but this gives you a flavor of most of the highlights. We also continue to work on novel legislative concepts to advance animal protection at the federal level, as well as regulatory and budgetary angles. So there are a lot of bills here, but I'll just mention a few, and then you can make note of bill numbers on topics that you might want more information on to look up on your own, or via our website, or you can ask a question at the end of the presentation. The one bill that tends to get the most press and public attention lately is the Big Cat Public Safety Act. This would prohibit the private possession of big cats and direct contact with big cat cubs while requiring current owners to register their animals with USDA APHIS. It would also outlaw the breeding of exotic cats, except at accredited zoos, wildlife sanctuaries, universities, qualified research facilities, and nonprofits. It passed out of the House Natural Resource Committee earlier this month, good news, and we'll be working with the bill sponsor and House leadership to bring this to a full floor vote quickly and hope to see it pass the House soon, hopefully sometime in July, again before the recess. The second bill I'd like to draw some attention to is the Traveling Exotic Animal and Public Safety Protection Act. This prohibits the use of wild animals in traveling shows, such as circuses, much like the Massachusetts state bill. This was a bill in the last Congress and was reintroduced for this session at the end of last year. Not much movement so far, but still a priority. Finally, on the opposed list, I want to highlight the Exposing Agriculture Trade Suppression Act, otherwise known as EATS. This prohibits state and local governments from interfering with the production of agricultural products in other states. In other words, and from our perspective, it undermines state farmed animal protection laws like Prop 12 in California that improve confinement of hens, sows, and veal calves. We haven't seen traction yet on this bill. The Prop 12 lawsuit by the pork producers that is pending before the Supreme Court and to be heard on October 11th may impact this legislation depending on what the court decides. We'll also be monitoring the 2023 Farm Bill for inclusion of this language, similar to the King Amendment in 2018, and work to have it removed if that happens. To help with these, please visit our website to take action. Go to the homepage, scroll down to the bottom under How We Work, and click on Legislation to go to our program's landing page for a central repository of all the information I'm highlighting here today. Then reach out to your state or federal legislators to urge them to prioritize the bills I've discussed. And you can always connect with the appropriate staff person, which I'll detail at the end, about other ways to help as well. So let's move on to the third leg of the stool. We talked state and federal, and now let's talk local legislation. Local legislation is a powerful tool to help animals because it protects the animals who live right in your own community. This can facilitate action at higher levels of government as well. For example, in California, dozens of cities and counties enacted local retail pet sales ban before California as a state enacted the first statewide retail pet sale ban in 2017. We need you to lobby for stronger animal protection laws in your local communities and can provide guidance to advocates interested in changing laws at the city and county level. We have a form on our website that's specific to this issue where you can write in about an issue that you're trying to work on to get assistance from our team. We also have several webinars highlighted here targeted on how to work on local issues, such as bans on retail pet sales, circuses, and fur sales. Finally, we are expanding our campaigns program to grow our supporter engagement going forward. So expect to hear more from us as we continue to do more and bigger things. So since we've talked about local, state, and federal legislative efforts, I want to highlight who the people are that you should be connecting with at each of those levels. At the local level, everyone is represented by a city or county council or commission. It might be called something different in your local area, but based on your home address, you'll probably have one city councilor, a panel of county commissioners, and those are the people that are closest to the ground for you in terms of your impact. It's very important to get to know who those people are, to attend city council meetings, or to just make yourself known to them so that you can advocate for issues you care about in your local community. At the state level, everyone is represented by one senator and one representative or assembly member. Again, the nomenclature can vary based on where you're from. Make note that your state legislators are different from your federal legislators, which the latter is 2 senators per state and 1 congressperson in the House of Representatives. The best way to find who your people and elected officials are is to go to aldf.org/findmyrep. You'll put in your home address and it will immediately bring up these elected officials and more. It'll tell you your governor and some of the other positions as well. Those are also relevant depending on the stage that legislation is at and what the issue is that you're trying to pursue. So just again, make sure that you distinguish between your state legislators and your congressional legislators when we're talking about or asking you to perhaps make a call or email someone so that you know that you're targeting the right people for the right issue. So how can you help as an advocate and citizen lobbyist? I mentioned getting to know your not only local, but state and federal legislators and their staff. Create contacts for them in your phone or email platform. We try to make it easy for folks when we send out an action alert and ask you to contact your elected officials specific to whatever the issue and stage that a bill is at. However, it doesn't mean you can't reach out at other times of the year, even if legislation isn't introduced or actively moving through the legislature. It's important, sometimes even more valuable, to establish a relationship outside of the legislative session when they're very busy with the official process, and you can establish your subject matter expertise and availability as a resource so that when bills are actively moving through the legislature, they can call on you, or you've already raised your profile and they'll open your emails when they get them, asking them to vote a certain way on a specific issue. In order to endear yourselves to these folks, which are regular people just like us, review their bios that they post on their website and look for similarities or interests to build a relationship. Whether you might have graduated from the same college or grew up in the same town, or maybe they're your neighbor, especially at the local level. These are all things that help to establish a relationship. And again, look beyond just the legislator themselves, but their staff are sometimes as or more important because they are the gatekeepers of access to the legislators, and getting to know them and what they care about is very valuable. One way you can find out more about what they're working on and what they care about is to follow their social media and to subscribe to their newsletters if they have them. All of that enables you to call and write to express your opinion on legislation, which ultimately makes the ask for what you want the legislators to do on your behalf. One of the ways you can think creatively about how to have more impact is tapping into your sphere of influence. Beyond yourself, who else do you know? Do you have celebrity connections? Do you know of anyone with connections to a corporation within the state, or friends and family in key legislative districts that you could ask to additionally make calls on behalf of the issue you care about? Do you know any other influential community members who might be important to the legislator on other issues, but you are also aligned on the issue that we care about related to animals, and you could kind of make a 6 degrees of separation connection there? So those are just some examples of ways to kind of think about your contacts list and how you can expand your reach. Finally, we have several resources, probably more than you would ever need, that we provide to help you to do the work that helps us to expand our reach. If you want an overview of all the animal-related legislation that ALDF is working on an ongoing basis, and I say all, but I'll caveat that with, we don't have a web page or a highlight on every single bill that you've heard about today, but the priority ones certainly will be available on our website under the legislation page listed here. We also put out an annual rankings report where we evaluate all the animal cruelty laws and make that available on our website under aldf.org/state rankings. It's valuable and a really good talking point when you're speaking to legislators to look at that every year and see, where does your state rank? Has it moved up or down? And there are some notes that summarize what's good about it, that gave it a higher ranking, for instance, and then where there's room for improvement. And that's a great talking point when you're speaking to legislators and communicating with them about the things you care about and potential opportunity for new bill ideas. Of course, in order to take action and be specifically able to advocate on behalf of issues that we're trying to advance, make sure you're signed up for our email newsletter so that you'll get the appropriate requests at the right times, aldf.org/sign up. Finally, or not finally, but related to this area, watch our Lobby 101 presentation, which is a historical webinar you can access on our website, along with the How to Advocate for Animals webinar as well. Another great resource that we provide is our Model Animal Protection Laws Guidebook. It includes definition of terms, general prohibitions, defenses, pre and post-conviction procedures, and other provisions. And it covers a breadth of issues that is a good reference point if you have an idea and want to see what might be the best way to approach that in terms of bill language. But of course, don't feel like you have to be a professional, because we're here to do this work and appreciate anything that you all can do to help support that. So I'll wrap up by saying the best way to take action on an idea that might be something you want to pursue or is an opportunity in your area is to reach out to the legislative affairs professional who covers your state. And this is who we are and how to get a hold of us. You'll see the color-coded map that correlates to each of the four of us that are boots on the ground, if you will, for the program, and then our direct want address. So if your state wasn't represented today and you have a question about something that's going on, or you want to alert us to an opportunity or something that we should be on the lookout for in terms of defense, please don't hesitate to reach out. We can't be everywhere all the time. So we really rely on those of you that are all over the country. As I know from the registration report, there are at least 42 states represented on this call right now. So we've touched a lot of areas, and we appreciate any insights that you can provide, because you live in these communities and you know things that we don't know if we are not located there as well. So we appreciate anything you can do to assist us in that way. And with that, I will thank you for attending and leave plenty of time for questions, but also remind you that you should come back for the third quarter legislative update webinar at the end of September. There should be many more updates since California session will have ended. New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Congress will be back after the recess. So we'll be able to report to you on what's happened on those that were in process that I mentioned on today's presentation. So I'll open it up for questions now.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. That was so informative. And before we get to Q&A, because we have a lot of great questions, I did just want to say that this presentation was recorded, and a recording will be on our website at aldf.org/webinars. If you click on today's webinar, you'll see the recording, and there will also be the PowerPoint that was presented today. So if you'd like to keep track of legislation that was happening, or just go back to it for reference, that will be on our website. Our first question now is, does the Arizona Hen Welfare Bill have a sales ban? Which, of course, is in play because of the Prop 12 case being taken up by SCOTUS.
Yes, it does have a sales ban. It basically mirrors the language that was uh, put forward in a bill in the Arizona legislature last year, and the bill did not make it all the way through. So it was taken into a regulatory approach as opposed to legislative. But if you were familiar with the original Arizona bill, the language is the same.
Great, thank you. And now that leads us in, we have several Prop 12 questions.
Oh
Um,
dear.
could you talk a little bit more about what implications might be of SCOTUS looking at Prop 12, and or do you have any updates on Prop 12?
Well, knowing that SCOTUS is going to take it up on October 11th is the newest news that I just got this week. In terms of the implications, I think a lot of things are on hold, waiting for that decision to come down. I mean, it'll be heard on the 11th. They won't rule on it then. So I don't know if that'll be by the end of the year or when we'll know. Really internally, Prop 12, is in a litigation space at the moment. So our litigation department is the most knowledgeable about what that means. But I would say that all of us are sitting around with bated breath, waiting to see what the decision is and then what the fallout will be and how we'll react to that. So I'm sorry I can't give you a more detailed explanation, but it's making me think that either before or after, or maybe both, we could have an interesting webinar, at least two-part series on Prop 12 and what it all means.
Definitely. I think it's a good example too of how legislation and litigation get mixed in this
Yes.
in this area. Our next question is, are there any updates on stopping the Bureau of Land Management roundups? Are you
Oh,
aware of any?
I don't know what the updates are on that. Our organization has not worked on the horse issue in that way, but I know that that is, I think, continuing. We, as ALDF, we have not been involved on that particular issue.
Great. Thank you. And then our next question is, in Florida, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission has allowed loosely enforced kill policies upon invasive species, including iguanas. Do you have any ideas of how to limit this or limit loosely enforced kill policies in any state on any animal?
I am afraid I don't specifically know about this one, and I don't want to sound like a broken record. I cover personally the West Coast. My colleague Alicia Prygoski, who you saw on the map at the end, she currently covers Florida as one of our priority states, along with most of the Southeast, in addition to our federal work. So I'm going to say that we should get that specific question to Alicia and get direct follow-up to the asker so that we can get you the most accurate information.
That sounds great. Thank you. For anything for active legislation, is there anything that citizens can be doing to help right now to get those passed, or should they be waiting until the next session to help with the bills that will be there?
Oh, if a bill is still active, working on it during the session that it's in is the first priority. It takes sometimes many sessions to pass a bill. So we are always playing a long game, but I would say first look to us for guidance on when is the right time to insert yourself on an issue, because I gave you the updates of kind of where bills are in process, and there are strategic times where we would want to deploy supporter engagement because it's most effective to have people calling in or expressing their opinion via email or what have you. That isn't to say if you have a relationship with your legislator that you can't check in with whatever the normal frequency that you do that is and say, these are the bills that I know are still active. these are the things I care about. Where are you on these? But otherwise, I would defer to our guidance via action alert, which is when we know it's going to be extremely powerful and a way to move the needle on a bill that we need help to get the public involved. Sometimes we like to fly a little bit under the radar and don't want to rock the boat because it doesn't need it. And we kind of want to play that card when it's really powerful because we need to make more of an impression.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then our next question is, you talked about something when bills are held for study. Could you explain what that means? Are those just reintroduced into the next session?
Yes, held for further study means it's not going to be actively moving in that session. It might have a little bit of different terminology in different legislatures. That was specific to Massachusetts. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's assigned to a committee that goes off and works on that issue. It means it's like backburnered. So it's probably not going to move. It's not dead officially until the session is technically over, but it's not actively moving either. So then we pull back behind the scenes and figure out what we need to do to kind of jumpstart it.
Great, thank you. And then our next question is, my state doesn't seem to have much going on in it. Is there anything I can do for a neighboring state that seems to be a little bit more active? Or is it better to focus on trying to get laws passed in my state, or at least brought to the legislature?
Both. What you could do in a neighboring state, or really any state that you don't reside, is to try to figure out if you have connections there where you could influence people who are constituents in that state. You can share action alerts, you can educate people on issues, but being a direct point of contact and calling legislators isn't as effective because they really value constituent contacts as opposed to people that aren't their constituents calling from everywhere. That can sometimes backfire. I would say in a state where you didn't necessarily hear something today that's going on, that doesn't mean there's nothing happening in your state from an animal perspective. And I would say as well, there could be defense that needs to be played in your state where it's not necessarily as animal friendly, but that means it might be animal unfriendly. And it's just as important to oppose bad bills as it is to support good bills. So I would say look out for, especially if you're in a big agriculture state, bills that are being introduced that impact farmed animals, especially, or anything that you hear about that you could then elevate to us, because it might not have hit our radar either. So we appreciate those folks that are in states that don't get a lot of love because we can't be everywhere and we don't know everything that's happening. So we really appreciate those of you that are fighting the good fight out there in states that aren't as well represented by the work we're doing.
Great, thank you. And another question is, in one of the victories, you mentioned the ZAA. Is that different from the AZA?
Yes, the American Zoological Association and the Zoological Association of America are two distinct organizations. The long and short of it is AZA is the one that we are more friendly with. The ZAA is not. ZAA tends to represent roadside zoos and entities that we don't find acceptable to existing law. So we are often scanning for things that exempt ZAA or otherwise provide benefits to them equal to AZA that is problematic.
Great, thank you. And we did get several questions about this specific bill, so I will ask although it may be something Alicia is better to answer, but could you comment on the likelihood of passage of the FDA Safety and Landmark Advancements Act of 2022, which includes the provision that would preempt state laws from prohibiting cosmetics testing on animals?
Oh, that one wasn't even in my slide. Oh dear. I don't know specifically about that one. That one I would say let's definitely get the question to Alicia. I know we are involved. I just don't know the status of it. The bills that I mentioned that either have movement or are a higher, not higher priority, just have a higher likelihood of maybe having some movement are the ones that I know the most about. But I will say Congress right now is a difficult environment to play in just because, you know, it's an ever-changing landscape with what other issues are rising in prominence. So just getting a seat at the table and being able to kind of continue to chip away at the things that we've been working on for years, really, on some of these issues is an ongoing challenge.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Well, that is all for today. Thank you, Jennifer, for spending time with us today. And thanks to everyone for joining us and having such a great conversation. Please do take the survey that will pop up. It really does help us in our future planning. You might need to click the blue continue button. I hope everyone has a wonderful week, and we will see you back here in September for our Q3 legislative update.